everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our worship service. We are in the fourth and second to last installment of a series titled Some Assembly Required. And how many people have enjoyed this series so far? Anybody? Has it spoke to anybody, talked to anybody, convicted anybody? Yes. Before we jump in, I have a couple of really important announcements that I want to share. And the first one being that next week, we want to do a membership or member, Nuevo Amanecer Church member acknowledgement. Now, a lot of you have gone through our membership class, and that's a good thing, because that's one of the requirements for becoming a member, is going through the class and knowing what it is we believe, what do we value, what's our position, and different things, and signing an agreement that you say, hey, I'm on board, right? Like, I believe it, I'm on board with your mission statement, your purpose statement, the direction, your values, and everything else. And that's one of the things. But the second, so that's one of the things. So if you've been to the class and you never turned one of these in, you never said, you know what, I'm on board, let me sign, then you need to do that if you want to be a member of the church. But second, and most important, another requirement for membership is to turn in a second form with a brief description of your faith story, right? Your journey. How is it that you became to faith? Your personal understanding of the gospel. And we emailed this to a couple of people that have been to the class but haven't yet turned in these forms. So if that's you, if you have been to the class and you want to be part of this community, in case you don't on time, it doesn't mean that you're not part, but I'm just saying that we want to have all that in order and archived so that we can acknowledge everybody, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So if you don't have those papers, I have extras. I can give that to you today, and you'll have that homework this week. And it's also such a good exercise just to sit down and think of your story. Like, before Christ, I was this, and this is how I came to know Christ, and now my life is this. And it's so refreshing. It'll help you. It'll help you in your spiritual journey, just to kind of, gain new strengths and new energy and motivación y pues ánimo, encouragement. So I think that's the only announcement, right? Okay. So anyway, with that said, let's pray, because I'm excited about the message that God put in my heart to share with you today. Amen? Let us pray. Father God, I come before you this afternoon once again to give you thanks for God, just for the honor, the privilege, and once again giving us the opportunity to gather and to now set aside some time to study your word. God, the music might be over, the offerings already passed, God, but the time of worship is just beginning, because now, God, we want to continue to worship you by offering you our attention, by offering you, God, our minds. We want to focus on you, God. We want to put aside all distractions and be present here and now, God. So if you want to speak to us, God, help us to be available to hear your voice. Help us to be vulnerable, to let you work in our hearts today. And like every week, I humbly ask you, God, that what I share today, God, are not just my words, my ideas, concepts, or precepts, but God, let me just be an instrument in your hands, a conduit, so that your people, your church, can hear your voice. God, and I pray, and I sincerely ask you for you to meet us in such a personal, in such a powerful way here today. Encounter us, God, in such a powerful way that we can leave this place different than how we came in. And God, I pray all these things, and I give you thanks, and I do it all in the name that is above every name, the name of Jesus. And everybody said, Amen. Amen. All right, so like I mentioned a second ago, we are in the fourth installment, the fourth week of a 5-week series. We're going to finish the series next week which I have titled Some Assembly Required. And this series has been, we've been talking about relationships. But again, we're not just talking about marriage, we're not just talking about romantic relationships, but relationships in general, because our lives are overflowing with relationships. Right? Your relationship with your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, your coworkers, your colleagues at school or at work or whatever it is, we have relationships with all of these people. And what we have established in these few weeks is that great relationships, great marriages, great friendships, they're not accidental. They're not turnkey. They're not just ready to go, right? They take work. They take intentionality. Some assembly is required. And the analogy, right, that we use from the beginning, of our relationship, like if your relationship is not working and you just leave that relationship like, well, I'm just going to go get a new one, then that's not the right attitude, because that's like buying a piece of furniture at IKEA or Target or something. And the kind that comes in a box, right, that we can afford. And you can take it home, right? And then you sit on it for a couple of weeks. And then you're like, well, wait a minute, this is not doing what I saw on the website, or that's not what the advertisement says. So you take it back, but the fact is that you never took it out of the box, right? You never took the time to assemble the pieces, to work on the relationship. And again, we said, and I wrote on every week I've had this phrase written down on your outlines that says that every single one of our relationships have the ingredients within that relationship to be amazing, to be an amazing relationship. We just have to be willing to put in the work and assemble the pieces. Now, as you're aware, if you have been here for any time during this series, you know that we haven't been talking about specific relationships. Like, we haven't been talking about marriage and then your work relationships and then your siblings and then your friends or whatever. But instead, we've been talking about tools, right? We have been discussing different tools to gather and kind of collect in our emotional toolbox, right? Because if you're going to assemble something, you're going to need tools, right? And we have been gathering these tools that if we use them, if we apply them, they'll work in every single one of our relationships, whether it's at home or at school or at work or at sports, with family members or with strangers. So just a quick recap. The first week we said that the first tool is actually a relationship, and it's a relationship with God, right? And we need to start with God. And then we talked about the tool of gratitude, how that will help us to seek better things and to start seeing better things. And then last week we talked about the most important tool of all, the tool that unlocks all the other tools, and that's the tool of humility. And all of these messages are in our YouTube channel if you want to catch up. They've been a lot of fun. But today is going to be a little bit more practical. This week and next week are going to be more practical. Today is a little bit theoretical, is a little bit more in our minds, and then next week is going to be like nitty gritty. That's why we're finishing it next week. All right. So without further ado, today's relationship tool, what we're going to be discussing today, is the relationship tool of personal alignment. Personal alignment. You might be looking at this and you're like, what does that mean? Like, what are you talking about, personal alignment? And what we're talking about, you know what alignment means, right? Have you ever had a car that's out of alignment? Like, you let go of the wheel and it kind of veers to one side, right? You got to constantly, well, we want to do that in our lives, right? Like, if you let go of the wheel of your life, you don't want to just crash. You want to have alignment. But what is personal alignment? What are we talking about? When it comes to relationships, I'm talking about the alignment between our intentions and our actions. We want to have alignment between our intentions and our actions, because a lot of the time we have great intentions, right? We have great intentions to diet and exercise and eat healthy, and we have great intentions to call that person, to write that thank you note. We have great intentions to be sweet and to be forgiven and to be all these things. Our intentions are golden. Like, if we could keep up with our intentions, we would be awesome, right? But that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about how is it that we can align our intentions with our actions. And there's a really powerful verse in the book of Proverbs. We've been basing this whole series in the book of Proverbs, and chapter 30, verse 32 says that if you have been foolish, all right, and I'm already convicted, right? If you have been foolish in lifting up yourself, or if you have thought evil, put your hand on your mouth. That's good relationship advice right there, right? Like, just put your hand on your mouth and just be quiet, right? That's good relationship advice at times, not all the time. Verse 33 says, surely the churning of milk brings forth butter, and the wringing of the nose brings forth blood. So, the conclusion is, the forcing of wrath brings forth strife. Strife, obviously talking about conflict, fights, disagreements, discord, right? So the forcing of wrath brings forward strife, brings forth problems. Now, I was studying this and I had a hard time just to kind of come up with a way to explain it. There's a lot of words there. It's a little bit difficult to understand. So in my studies this week, I actually found a really helpful quote by a guy named Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie was an American writer and lecturer. And he said this, and this is such a simple thought, but such a powerful principle. And he said, look, if you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive, right? If you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive, right? And when it comes to our relationships, again, this is such a simple statement, such a simple principle, but at the same time, it's such a powerful image, because if you desire to gather honey, something sweet, right? Then how you go about it is going to determine whether you get honey or you get something else. You know what I'm saying? Like, if your intention is to gather honey, you shouldn't go over and say, hey, give me the honey, right? And kick, because what are you going to get? You're going to get bee stings, right? You're going to be all bitten up, right, by the bees, because if you want to gather honey, the last thing you need to do is kick over the beehive. And this is kind of what Proverbs is talking about, right? If you go swinging and angry, right, and forcing wrath, you're not going to get butter. That's what you get when you churn milk. You know what I'm saying? When you swing and when you put forth your wrath, what's gonna happen? Blood out the nose, right? That's what I was talking about. Blood is gonna be coming out, and then you're like, well, yeah, I mean, that's obvious, duh. You know, if you hit somebody or whatever. But how many times in our relationships we act surprised when people react to certain things, and we're like, well, why is she acting like that? Or why did he say that? Or why does she act that way? Well, maybe it's because you were mean and considerate, right? And aggressive. And now you don't like the outcome, right? You don't like where you have arrived via the means that you took to get there. And again, that is because there is no alignment between both our intentions and our actions. And what happens is that when there's conflict, when there's difficulties in a relationship, a lot of times we want to justify by saying, well, that wasn't my intention. That's not what I wanted. And again, we put our intentions out there a lot of times instead of taking responsibility that there wasn't an alignment between what I wanted, what my intentions were, and what I actually did, right? And that's what it's saying, right? Surely churning of milk brings forth butter, but the wringing of the nose brings forth blood. So the forcing of wrath brings forth strife. So there has to be an alignment. We have to work on aligning both our intentions and our actions, which then brings me to my message in a sentence. Like every week, I share with you one thought or one idea that just kind of encapsulate, or if you don't remember or listen to anything else, I want you to remember that your intentions, I want to say this lovingly but firm, your intentions don't matter. My wife has told me this many times. Your intentions don't matter, right? Your behavior does. Your intentions It really does. It really doesn't matter, right? And it doesn't matter what you wanted to say. It doesn't matter what you wanted to say. No one can hear what you wanted to say. We can only hear what you said. No one knows, or no one, it doesn't matter what you meant by that passive aggressive comment or that cruel kind of joke or whatever. It doesn't matter what you meant or your intentions were. What matters is what you did. What matters is your behavior. And again, sometimes, so many times, we justify by saying, well, it wasn't my intention to hurt your feelings. Or the worst apology of all times. Well, I'm sorry you got hurt, right? That's the worst apology in the history of the world. And it's wrong. It's wrong for us to try to justify our actions. The truth is that if we want better relationships, we need to be better aligned. Now, I thought of this idea, like another type of sentence or thought, late last night, and I didn't write it down, but I want you to kind of jot this down in your notes, that if we are able to widen the distance between our feelings and our actions, all right? If we can widen the distance between our feelings and our actions, then we can close or shorten, or we can align the distance right between our intentions and our actions, all right? It took me a minute to kind of get that out there, so let me say it smoothly, right? If we can widen the gap between our feelings and our actions, we can close the gap between our intentions and our behavior, all right? And that kind of makes sense, right? If we can, because a lot of times we feel something and we just want to do it, right? But if we can just wait till the feeling goes, right? And you're hungry, but not that hungry, right? Like you can just wait a few minutes, right? And then what happens? Then you can really close the gap between what you really wanted to do, your intentions and your actual behavior. So we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But today, what I'm going to share with you are these are principles, and like we said, we have been talking about relationships. So I've been studying, I've been reading articles and different things, in Psychology Today, and different counselors and all these relationship advice and all this stuff. So what I'm going to share with you today are actually steps and principles that you would hear in a counseling session. Or if you have ever been to a relationship or therapy or whatever, this is something that you would hear in one of these things. However, we're going to see how some of these things do have biblical foundations and biblical principles that will help us and that God definitely wants us to implement into our lives. Now, a lot of what we're going to talk about today is going to be things that we're going to do in our head. All right, it's going to sound complicated. How could I ever do that? But let me just put it this way. If Spanish is your first language and English is your second language, then let me take you on a journey and help you remember what it was like when you were learning English. Do you remember, and this happened to me, maybe it didn't happen to you, but when it happened to me, I remember that when I was learning English, I would hear somebody speaking English, and then I would have to take those words, translate them into Spanish so that I can understand what they're saying. Then I have to think about what I'm going to say, and I would think in Spanish and then have to translate that into English so that then I could go ahead and respond, right? And there was like a 5 to 10 second, right, delay between the conversation. It's like, yeah, that is true, right? And so what we're going to talk about today, you're like, well, how is this possible? But now, and I still remember to this day, the time when I heard English, I thought in English, and I responded in English, and it was amazing, right? And the night before, a few weeks later, I started dreaming in English, and that's when I got it locked down. And now, like you don't have to do all that in your head anymore, right? You just kind of hear in English and you respond, and you don't have to go through a lot of work. What we're going to do today is going to sound like a lot of work. And in the beginning, it might be. But just like learning a new language, you can do it. And you can do it, and it's important. It's going to benefit our relationships. So I'm going to give you the 4 steps right away, and then we're going to go ahead and break them down. So the 4 steps are analyze, extrapolate, prioritize, and navigate. All right? So these are the 4 things that we're going to discuss today. We're going to analyze, right? When we're in conflict, when we're in the discussion, in our relationships, when something comes up, a difficult conversation, we're going to analyze, we're going to extrapolate, we're going to prioritize, and then we are going to navigate. So let's talk about this. First of all, we're going to analyze. Once again, anytime that you are in a situation where you just want to blow up, you just want to force your wrath, right? And you feel like doing or saying something that you know is probably going to cause more difficult time, right? More a conflict or a fight in the future, right? Then in this case, we stop and we analyze. And this is where counselors tell, couples, just stop and breathe and count to 10 or count to 1,000, whatever you need to count to. But this is the time where you do that. And when you do this, you start analyzing. I heard this week that, I read this week that some business people, like before they go into meetings, if they know that they're going to get maybe riled up in a meeting, what they do is that they'll take something to drink, right? And in case somebody says something or somebody does something or a comment comes up, what they do is instead of reacting right away, they'll pause, take a drink, because nobody thinks it's weird that you're pausing when you're drinking, right? And during that time, you're like, okay. Let me think what he said, and let me see how to respond, right? And you're just kind of, and it's so practical, right? So next to this word, what I want you to write is, okay, what you're thinking about is, okay, what I want to do is, all right, or what I want to say is during your analyzation period, what you're thinking is, okay, what I want to say is, and again, at this time, you want to be honest. You don't want to hold back. You just want to be as honest as you can, right? You don't want to ignore your emotions at this moment. In fact, you want to study them. You want to isolate them. You want to focus on them and analyze and think, man, I am ticked off right now. Like that really riled me up. I feel like saying something mean about their mama, right? Like I feel like just belittling them or hurting them or humiliating them. Like honestly, I feel like punching them right there. I feel like punching somebody in the face, or maybe you think, man, I feel like bringing up ancient history. I feel like bringing up their past failures or that thing that's already been dealt with, but I feel like and again, at this time, we're not, getting to any conclusions or anything. We are simply just analyzing how it is that we feel. And during the analyzation period, what you want to do is, attach next to your feelings the reason why you feel that way, right? Because you're not like that normally. Right? Normally, you're not out to pick a fight. Normally, you're pretty calm and collected, right? So just start thinking, man, I want to do this. I want to say this because, I don't know, I feel disrespected. I feel that I'm not appreciated, or they're taking advantage of me, or I don't feel loved, or whatever it is that's making you feel that way. Just analyze and think about that. And again, we're not coming to any decisions. We are just simply trying to be honest about our emotions so that we can understand them. When we're honest and we take time to study our emotions, then we can go ahead and start to widen that gap between our feelings and our actions, right? Because so many times we act on our emotions without trying to figure out, well, why is it that I feel this way? So after the analyzation period, we take that analysis and then second point, we extrapolate, all right? So we take the data from our analysis and we extrapolate it. All right, so to extrapolate means to play something out, all right? To kind of unravel it and to take it to its logical end. So next to the word extrapolate, I want you to write, okay, what I really want to do, what I really want to say is this. But if I do that, if I say that, then this is going to happen. All right. Now, this point, made me think of the game Angry Birds. How many people have ever played Angry Birds on your phone? My kid, he is now into playing games on my iPad, right? And he has like 50 games, and he constantly wants me to download new games because he gets tired of the old ones, right? But it made me think of this game because I've been, I downloaded this game for him the other day, and I was trying to show him how to play it. And in this game, if you know the premise, you have to kind of use that slingshot to knock out the pigs, right? But what happened when you pull the slingshot, you can adjust the trajectory and you can see, right? And that's kind of what extrapolating is you're mapping out, you're looking ahead of what is the trajectory, where is this, like if I let go of the bird here, where is it gonna land? And in our relationships, we have to think, all right, so if I do this, if I say that, it's gonna, even though it's gonna feel great, right? Because I got the perfect comeback that's gonna burn them so good. But if I do that, if I say that, where is that gonna land me? Where is that gonna take me, right? What am I likely to have to do after that? How are they gonna react? Or maybe how is this action gonna escalate this situation? Or how are the long-term impacts of my actions, of my decisions, and my behavior? What are gonna be the long-term impacts on my family, on my kids, my friendships, my relationships, my career? So again, just when you're analyzing, you take that analysis, man, this is what I feel, this is what I want to do, but then extrapolate it. Okay, well, if I do that, then this might happen. And then she might say this, and then I have to bring that up, and this and the other, right? And again, we're still not making any decisions, right? You can still take that road, but when you extrapolate, then you can choose that road knowing the possible outcome, or knowing what could be all of the ramifications of your actions before you do them. So basically you're thinking, okay, what dominoes could be knocked down as a consequence of my behavior, of my actions, of this thing that I want to do? And Proverbs 4:26, I mean, this is the wisdom of Proverbs 4, where it says, look, consider well and watch carefully the path of your feet. Consider well, right? Just think about it. Think about the steps that you're taking. Think about the path that you are taking. And then when you do, then all your ways will be steadfast and sure. So if we consider well and we extrapolate, we play out the circumstances, the question is, are they going to take us to a place that when we get there, are we going to be happy? Are we going to be happy? Is that what we want when we get there? So just these first two steps, just this analysis and this exercise of extrapolation, just these two will help us greatly in our relationships, because what happens when we get in the rhythm, when we get in the habit of not just reacting and not just saying the first thing that comes up because it's going to feel so good, then what happens? You can start to notice some patterns. Maybe some repeating issues or common themes, and you say, you know what, every time that this happens, every time that I show up late, every time that I do this, every time that I make this type of comment or whatever, then this is what it makes me feel, and this is what I want to do, and if I do, then that's what's going to happen or whatever. And what happens when we start seeing those patterns, then we can start to better handle the conflict in our relationship. And again, this is what Proverbs 27:12 said. It says, a prudent person foresees danger and takes precaution. So if you stop to analyze, if you start playing things out and making better decisions, widening that gap between your feelings and your actions, then you can start seeing patterns and say, you know what, last time I did that, then it didn't go so well. Because why? The Bible says, the simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. So how many times are we just going to walk blindly and do the same thing and whack, right? And do the same thing and just keep getting hit in the face, right? And again, there's a quote out there that says that doing the same thing over and over and over, expecting different results, that's the definition of insanity, right? And that's not what we want in our relationships. We don't want that our relationships make us crazy. So we stop, we analyze, and then we extrapolate and play them out. So that takes us then to our third point. So right now, again, this sounds like a lot of information, but we could get in the habit or in the pattern that this will take seconds, right? Because as we seek God, as we start with God, as we look into our relationships with gratitude, with humility, then we can start to learn and better react. And this can just take seconds, just instantaneously. God, through His Spirit, can help us be wiser in our relationships. And number 3, we can then prioritize. And what I want you to write next to prioritize is, all right, so I know what I want to do. I know what I feel like doing. But when I play that thing out, it's going to get me to a place where really I don't want to be. So what I actually want is, all right, so this is what we're thinking. Like in our analysis and extrapolation, we're in the beginning of the story. When we prioritize, we're thinking of the end. If you're thinking of writing a story, you have a great introduction and then come up with an ending to that story. This is where we get to be creative and we can just think, all right, my ideal ending to this, right? My ideal outcome is to for this to happen, or for this to occur, or for us to be at this point in our relationship. Because again, if we were to pause, if we were to practice and try to widen the gap between our feelings and our actions, I guarantee you that none of us would choose fight. None of us would say, well, you know what? You know what would be great? Instead of going out to dinner and having a nice time, you know what I want to do? I just want to have a fight. I want to end the night just yelling at each other quietly so the kids don't hear us, right? I want to end the night instead of watching a movie and cuddling at night. No. I don't want to get any sleep tonight because we're fighting all night. That's what I really want to do. None of us would choose that. But that's where we end up a lot of times, right? None of us would choose that. And this is the time to prioritize this. You know what? What I really want is this. This is the ending to the story that I want. And again, this is why I love that video that we have watched now for 2 weeks, that love is for losers. Relationships are for losers, right? And again, we don't lose for losing's sake. We humbly decide to lose. Can we? Are we humble enough to lose for the benefit of our relationship, to be able to keep our relationship? So again, if we were to take time and think about it, I guarantee you that none of us would choose to fight. Instead, we might think about it and say, you know what? I just want to be heard. I just want to be considered. I just wanted to be understood. I wanted to be appreciated. That's all I really wanted. I just wanted us to eat together, to spend time together. I wanted us to do this, and in the prioritization stage, this is where we think, okay, this is what I really want. What I really want is this. So we got the ending, we got the beginning, and we got the ending. So now we have to fill in the middle, right? In the middle of the story. And then again, this is the most difficult part of it, because this is where it's so hard, right? But this is where we navigate, right? This is where we try to navigate. And then what I want you to write next to the word navigate is, okay, so the things that I need to do to get to the ending that I want are, right? And what is it that you need to do? Do you need to apologize? Do you need to do what you were told, right? Or what you promised to do? What is it that you need to do? Do you need to repent? Do you need to go to God, right? What is it that you need to do in order to navigate, in order to get to the place where you want to be? Now, in this instant and in this period, your feelings don't matter, all right? In this time, don't worry about how you feel, because more than likely, what you're gonna fill out in your mind at this point is gonna feel like the opposite of what you want to do, right? It's gonna feel like the opposite of what you really want to do, because you established that you wanted to just punch him in the face. But then when you played it out and you thought about the trajectory of your actions, you were like, you know what? Well, that's gonna head in a direction that I don't want to be. So I'm gonna prioritize and navigate a different way. And what happens is that sometimes when we abandon our feelings, it feels like constricting, right? It feels like, man, it's just that it was gonna feel so good. Yeah, maybe for 10 or 15 minutes, but then it was gonna feel horrible the rest of the day. It was gonna feel horrible the rest of the night. Then you were gonna suffer the consequences the rest of the week. So when we navigate, we have to think of Aesop's fable. Aesop's fable, I didn't know who it was. Aesop is this ancient Greek storyteller. And I read this story this week. I personally had never heard it. But in this particular story, there's this discussion between the sun and the wind. And they're arguing, against each other, trying to figure out who's stronger. Right? And the sun is saying, well, I'm stronger because I make everything right. Without me, nothing lives. And the wind is like, well, I'm strong because I can do this. And they're battling and they're arguing and they can't figure it out until they see this traveler walking by. And they decide together, well, you know what? Let's go ahead and let's do a competition. And whoever can get this guy to take his jacket off, whoever can take the jacket off of this guy, will prove to be the strongest. And the wind was like, all right, let's do it. So then the sun kind of hid away behind a cloud and the wind started blowing. The wind started blowing and the jacket just kind of started fluttering and kind of falling off the shoulder. And the wind is like, oh, this is going to be no problem. I got this. So he started blowing, but what happens? The harder and the harder that the wind started blowing, the tighter and tighter that the guy was holding his coat, right? And it was holding it, and then he started buttoning it up, his zipper, and putting his hands in his pockets, and curving in and putting the hood, right? And the wind just kind of blew and blew and blew and blew until he couldn't anymore. And the guy just kind of, he held on and he couldn't get the jacket off, right? So he couldn't do it. So then the sun, all right, well, it's my turn. So what happened? What did he do? He just came out from his hiding place. And he just started to graciously shine over the man. And he just shone over the man to the point where the guy started getting hot and sweaty. And slowly he just started unbuttoning one button at a time until finally, out of his own free will, he just took his jacket off, put it over his sleeve, and continued walking. And the wind was marveled. He was amazed. He went to the sun. He was like, man, how did you do that? I can't believe you got it. You got this guy to take his jacket off. And the sun said, man, it was easy. The only thing that I did, I just brightened the day and I got my way. I just brightened the day and I got my way. And the moral of the story is that gentleness and friendliness are stronger than fury and force. All right? Gentleness and friendliness are stronger than fury and force. And we need to remember that when we want to impose our will and impose our wrath, because sometimes that's not going to get us where we really want to be, to the end that we really want to reach, right? What we're actually doing is actually moving us further away from what we really want. Now, in my personal relationship with my wife, I am thankful that my wife has a bachelor's degree in marriage and family counseling, which means that I never get to win an argument. I just don't, right? And I'm blessed that she does. She has knowledge and she is very good for a relationship. And my wife, she is confrontational, right? And she is the problem-solving type, right? Me, I am non-confrontational and passive. sometimes opposites attract, right? So, right, with my wife, right, when there's an issue, she brings it up, and I'm so thankful for that. But she brings up the issue, and she is the one to ask questions, right, and to think of how this problem happened. And you know, we talk often about our past experiences, and she helps me to open up about past experiences and things that happened before, and you know, so that I can try to explain why it is that I have these tendencies and proclivities and all this other stuff, and that's great, and I'm thankful for that. However, because I'm non-aggressive, because I'm non-confrontational, because I am more passive, when there's an issue, when there's trouble, when there's difficulty, when we argue, and we do. I'm a pastor, but I'm still a sinner, right? A lot of times I kind of shut down, right? I shut down, and because I'm not the type of person that has like the perfect comeback right there, right? Like, I'm not that type of person, right? Like, that I can just think or whatever. You know, what I say here, it takes a lot of time for me to prepare what I have to share with you every Sunday. I can't just come up with things on the spot. I need time to process and to think. And again, I need to be able to calm down, because I don't think about the past or anything. I just try to come up to figure out a solution. Now, at the end of the day, whenever there's conflict and whenever there's a difficulty in my relationship with my wife, both of us have the same goal. Both of us want the same thing, which is peace, right? We want to have peace. We want to have harmony. We want to have a solution. We want restoration to our relationship. But the way that we go about it sometimes is the opposite of, right? The way that we both go about it sometimes gets us further and further from what we actually want. Why? Because there's nothing that my wife hates more than when I shut down, right? There's nothing she hates more, because she feels ignored. And I'm not trying to ignore her. I'm not trying to do that. But it's just that I can't be bombarded with a bunch of questions, because I can't think that fast. I can't process. So what I do, I need time to myself. I go in the basement and clean the basement. I do something, right, to give myself time. And again, we're not experts at this, and thankfully we don't fight often. But when we do, you know, we have kind of learned, and almost without knowing it, we just kind of know to give time to each other. And after an hour or two or whatever, we kind of come back, or I come back usually with my tail between my legs, and I'm like, I'm sorry, right? Because this and the other. Why? Because I've had now the time to process and analyze. Or other times, you know, she has apologized to me, and then we can kind of move on. And again, the Bible tells us in Proverbs 15:1, look, a soft and gentle and thoughtful answer turns away wrath. But a harsh and painful and careless words, right? Harsh, painful, and careless words, what do? They stir up anger. So that's why we need to, for God, right? For God to help us, we need to widen that gap between what we feel and what we do, so that we can actually close the gap between what we really want, what my intentions are, and what I do with that information, right? With what I want. And again, this is a problem. This is difficult. This is not normal, because a gentle and thoughtful answer is not satisfying. Right? It's not satisfying. No, I just want to let them have it right now, right? We just want to send that text in all caps with exclamation points, because it's going to feel so good, right? But a gentle and it doesn't feel good to do that, right? And that's why it's so difficult. But again, the goal here is not to win. The goal is not to win. In every single relationship, when there's conflict, look, we can win the argument, but lose the relationship. I've heard it said this way: you can write your way out of every relationship in your life, your marriage, your friendships, your coworkers, right? You can write your way. Write your way mean that you can be right all the time, because nobody likes a know-it-all, right? Nobody likes that person that thinks they're right all the time. You can write your way out of every single relationship in your life. So the goal here is not to win, but it's just to appease the relationships, right? To calm the relationship, to diffuse the anger. And this is why all of these tools that we have been discussing are so important, right? We run to God. We start with God. We're thankful for the people in our lives, for the relationship in our lives. We're humble. We're willing to take that second place. Not to lose, not to be a doormat, but for the health and the benefit of this relationship. I am humble enough to take second place or whatever. And again, it doesn't matter what it feels like. We do it because we want to be aligned between our intentions and our actions. And breathing is key through this whole thing. Reading this week, I learned that experts say that we are breathing shallower than ever these days. Partly because we're constantly hunched over in our phones, right? Our posture is terrible or whatever. But studies have shown that breathing, right? When you're stressed, our breathing patterns change. That's kind of obvious, right? We don't take long, deep breaths, but instead we take like short and shallow ones. And instead of breathing with our diaphragm, when you're riled up, you breathe with your shoulders almost, right? And interesting to know that out of all the oxygen that you take, out of all the air that you breathe, only 20% of that goes to your brain. The majority of the air that you breathe is going to go to critical life-saving functions that keep you alive. So what that means is that when you're not breathing deeply, when you're breathing shallower, the first things to go are the ability to analyze, the ability to kind of process your emotions, and those things kind of just take a back seat to you staying alive, obviously, right? So when you're in an argument and you're not breathing deeply, there's statistically proven there's a loss of memory, loss of focus. It lowers your ability to overcome your moods, and it heightens your sense of anxiety and depression, right? So again, take a cup with you, breathe deeply, and this is a perfect time for you to analyze and extrapolate when you're breathing. Now, you know that you're breathing deep if you're actually moving your stomach, right? That you're actually moving your diaphragm. And also, you know that you got kind of control back because you need to do this next time you're in an argument. Pay attention to your hands. Because when you're in an argument and you're tense, your hands kind of tend to do this, right? They kind of tend to close. And what happens when you breathe, just be conscious of your hands and leave them open, because just that simple act of flooding your brain with oxygen is kind of help you calm down, help you analyze, help you extrapolate, help you think about what you really want, prioritize, and then help you navigate. And if that wasn't enough, when we do that, when we do these things, we're actually more like Jesus. We actually become more like Jesus. I want to finish sharing this beautiful verse in Hebrews 12:2. This is the Message translation, which kind of spells it out so clearly. It says, look, keep your eyes on Jesus, who both began and finished this race that we are in. Study how he did it, right? Study how he did it. It says, because he never lost sight of where he was headed, because he never lost sight, because he never lost that trajectory of thinking ahead of where he was headed, the accelerating finish in and with God, right? What does it say? He could put up with anything along the way. Cross, shame, whatever. He could put up with whatever. Why? Because he never lost sight of where he was going to end up, right? He never lost sight of where he was going to end up. And that way he was able to be aligned between his intention and his behavior. What this verse really describes to us is how is it that Jesus, that night when he was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, how is it that Jesus was able to say that famous prayer where he said, God, let not my will be done, but yours. All right? How was he able to do that? If you remember the story, Jesus was praying and he was in such agonizing pain, just stressed out that he was sweating, just drops of blood. But he knew to start with God, to go to God in prayer. And he started praying. And if you think that Jesus was just dying to go to the cross, Jesus didn't want to, right? And in this prayer, he was like, God, if there's any other way, if there is any other way, like if you have come up with something in these past 33 years, if you came up with something that we didn't think about before the foundation of the earth, if you have come up with something, let me know, is there any other way for me to pass this cup, right? For me to not go through this suffering. But they figured out, look, there is no other way, right? What is that? Jesus was extrapolating. He was seeing the trajectory. Well, if I don't go to the cross, then I can't save all these people, right? And when he looked, right, if I don't go, then all these people will be lost, because nobody can be saved apart from my grace. No good works, nothing, nobody can be saved. So what happened? So because he saw that, he said, all right, well, me saving these people and me, right, just kind of breaking that veil and opening for people to have a personal relationship with me, right, that's worth fighting for. So he prioritized. And he said, you know what, I'm willing to do this because that's what I really want. So that he was able to navigate and put up with suffering, with the cross, with whatever. Because he was able to pause, not just act on his feelings, but submit his will, his life to God. And when we do this, we become more like Jesus. And on the other side of that coin, we actually gain more freedom. And this is so powerful. Because again, when we don't act on how we feel, sometimes it feels constricting. It feels like we are not being true to ourselves. I'm being a hypocrite. I just want to say this. I just want to do this because it's what I feel. But the truth is that you are a prisoner to your feelings if you always do what you feel. You are a prisoner to your feelings if you always do what you feel. So when we widen the gap between our feelings and our actions, then we can shorten the gap between our intentions and our behavior and be better aligned for God's glory, for our good, and for the benefit of every single one of the relationships in our life. Amen?